The world implodes in war, and all imaginings coalesce around the destruction of another. War is an excess of failure, the culmination of decisions orchestrated by tiny elites, and the militarization of perception, pandering to the youthful affectations of structural violence. The deliberated propaganda and aestheticization of war becomes manifest. It caresses and seduces, and society seemingly slips into some sort of mythological torpor, blinded by the overriding authority of war itself. The signature of war is its addictive simplicity, its corruption of message, its warrior stain, and the childlike evocation to surrogate ideals of what it means to be a man. There exists today a subtle eroticism to war, a sexual prowess, a voyeurism, a flattery of significance, a dislocation of actuality, and all along the message reliant to the disparity between the signifier and the signified, and an unquestioned blurring of reality. For all these reasons, I find it uniquely difficult to comment on photo books of war. It's as if one is siding with war's relevance. Of the more powerful photo books is Bertolt Brecht's Kriegsfibel, or War Primer, edited by Ruth Berlau and originally published by Eulenspiegel Verlag in Berlin, 1955. The short review by Joachim Schmidt is a precise account of Kriegsfibel's role. As long as photography has been established as a news medium, photographs have been used as tools of propaganda. It works. Photographs are perfect means of misinformation. Before the Second World War, not many people had asked the questions that obviously have to be asked. Living in exile, Bertolt Brecht asked many of them by writing short poems along photos he encountered in the international illustrated press. The poems do what the photographs and their captions don't do. They add thought, context, background. One man's poetry versus a regime's propaganda. A hopeless case. The regime perished, poetry survived. David Douglas Duncan's photo book, I Protest, rails against the insanity of war, the disastrous conflict in Vietnam, and, as it states on the cover, in behalf of the men who will never get out, for whom help came too late, I protest. As Duncan declares in his foreword, the photographic life of this book spans 8 days in February 1968. Marines of the 26th Regiment entrenched at Khe Sanh were under constant harassing fire from 2 North Vietnamese army divisions concealed in the surrounding mountains. All of these pictures were taken within the Khe Sanh combat zone. This book is a real cry from the heart, trying to reach the audience of government decision makers with their top secret papers and maps and briefings, and no reality. Duncan's essay, which accompanies the book, is a powerful testament to the arrogance of war makers and is written with a gritty realization of its inevitability. We may destroy the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese and their slender jungle land beyond recall of the slightest glimmer of life for 100 years, and they still will be the victors, because they stood, forget their credo, they stood against the most powerful nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. And in the end, it was they, the simple rice farmers and fishermen and their children, who were stronger. I protest the tactics, I protest the destruction, and I protest the war rhetoric of Vietnam. A compilation of first-hand accounts, poems, essays, letters, and photographs make up Nicaragua by Susan Meiselas. I remember when this was published in 1981. It seemed miles from the usual war porn. This was a truly concerned photographer with an extended empathy, living and breathing the scars of a country in upheaval. The stoicism of the women, the tragedy of the children, the fighters, and all around the denial of surviving. It's a shocking narrative where Meiselas' presence is both omnipotent and unseen, and carries the confidence of showing the total image of war, not merely the sought-after close-ups of dead bodies or souped-up fighters. In the introduction to the 2008 reprint by First Aperture, Susan Meiselas' Nicaragua is a contemporary classic, a seminal contribution to the literature of concerned photojournalism. starting with a powerful evocation of the Somoza regime during its decline in the late 1970s. The images trace the evolution of the popular resistance that led to the insurrection, culminating with the triumph of the Sandinista revolution in 1979. All the photographs were shot in Nicaragua between June 1978 and July 1979. If Meiselas's work is a construct of war, then Jens Liebchen's DL07, Stereotypes of War, a Photographic Investigation, is a deliberate deconstruction of war. As Jerry Badger in the photo book, A History, Volume 2 notes, Liebchen's postmodern reportage tells us to trust nothing, neither tale nor teller, and certainly not the postmodern deconstruction of both. Ian Jeffrey's introduction supposes that Liebchen suggests we think of war photography as a genre, making use of a set of conventions. It is no more authentic, he proposes, than the war film or the Western. Normally, of course, we choose to see it as authentic, as truthful reportage. In this respect, Liebchen's is a subversive work, although in actuality he is merely asking us to reflect on our expectations. As any helicopter, for example, over a down-at-heel urban terrain stands for surveillance or for police work and a distant HQ, just as a stained wall or pavement stands for spilled blood, snatch squads, executions, and half-hearted attempts to dispose of the evidence. The series of 19 images in this well-designed pocket-sized book succeed in his postmodern dictum of disinformation. The photographs were shot in Tirana, Albania, in 1999 to 2000, when the country was at peace, and DL07 is the Universal Transverse Mercator Grid Reference, UTM, for Tirana, as found in the Gazetteer of Albania, published by the United States Defense Mapping Agency. In the end, I was shocked at how easy it is to distill the sense of the other into event, something the Western media do on a daily basis, where ownership of both event and space is paramount in controlling the ears and perceptions of its readership. The last of the 5 books is a visual odyssey without a start or endpoint. You could say that Dima Gavrish's Inshallah is in the same vein as DL07, in that the sequence of visual events unfolding before the reader are as equally disorientating and ambiguous. Where they differ entirely is that Inshallah is a realization of conflict extracted from the recent Afghan war. The events happen within the context of the work. The interpretation is one of bewilderment, a poetic interlude by a photographer working for Western news and clearly wishing to pass on his own understandings and feelings around what he is witnessing. As Douglas Nicol writes in the introduction, Dima Gavrish leaves the fog of war intact. His photographs do not take a position, or if they do, it is one as ancient as the Iliad. As long as we have wars, we will need poems about war.